Our gospel today is a continuation of last week's gospel, literally a day in the life of Jesus. Last week we heard how he began in the morning in the synagogue teaching, and people were amazed because he taught with authority. And how Jesus continues to teach us with authority through the Bible and the teachings of the church, and we too, like those people, should be amazed. People are also amazed at Jesus' authority to heal. And in the evening, they brought to Jesus all who were sick and possessed by demons, and Jesus would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. Again, from last week in the morning, there was a demon in the synagogue shouting, "I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But because a demon's will is totally given over to evil, this wonderful knowledge that they have of who Jesus is doesn't do them any good. For us, though, because we have given our will over to the Lord, that we want to love Jesus above all things, the more we know about him, the more we love him. The more we know his message, the more deeply we will fall in love with him. So what is this message that Jesus proclaimed? Well, we call it the good news. We call it the message of salvation, the gospel. St. Paul, in our second reading, has given his whole life, every ounce of his being, over to making the gospel known. In fact, he says, "Woe to me if I do not proclaim the gospel." And so it's something that we need to be reminded of, refreshed in, deepen our knowledge of the gospel. Last week I warned about where we find our knowledge of our faith. Secular media, not a good idea. Either they're ignorant or outright malicious towards opposing our Christian faith. Friday, the sad news from the Supreme Court of Canada, their judgment on a physician-assisted suicide. So many ways that it contradicts and is contrary to the gospel. Our Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops have issued a statement. I encourage you to go online and read it. The bulletin was already published when it came out, so it's not in the bulletin. But there is something in the bulletin there on page 4 at the top from the Archbishop, part of his statement of a couple weeks ago as he was speaking to some parents and commenting on the sex ed curriculum that is being imposed on all schools in Ontario. Not only did the Archbishop speak of the materials in this curriculum contradicting Catholic teachings, but also that it is an imposition on the rights of parents as primary educators of their children. So the Archbishop urged all the parents to contact the Minister of Education, the Premier, and their MPP. So I hope you're able to do that. Lastly, something that I think that has kind of slipped under the radar is the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. It has drafted a policy that would oblige our doctors to provide referrals even when these are contrary to their conscience, contrary to their moral and religious beliefs. So our Catholic doctors are saying, well, if this comes to pass, we're going to have to leave the province in order to practice medicine and our faith. Again, it's kind of slipped under the radar. If you want some information, go online to the Catholic Civil Rights League. They have wonderful information and ways to send your support for the doctors and object to the government's proposal or the college's proposal. And there is on the bulletin board some information as well to that regard. That's a whole lot of bad news, isn't it? Well, the good news inspires us to do something about the bad news, right? And so let's focus on the good news. The good news, the message of Jesus, the revealing of God's love, the message of salvation that is embodied in the person of Jesus Christ. This message of salvation in Jesus Christ is so radically unique that no other religion, no other system of belief, no New Age spirituality or any other kind of spirituality comes anywhere close to the message of salvation in Jesus. And so we need to be well informed. We need to cherish this message. We need to embrace this message in our lives. The message began with the bad news of original sin that separated us from God, this infinite chasm between God and humanity, right? Or you can look at it as that this infinite love was offended, was rejected by that original sin. It was a saying no to this infinite love. And so being finite in our existence, we couldn't bridge that gap. Finite in our love, we could not reconcile that offense. But Jesus, being both infinite God and one of us, was able to reconcile us. He atoned for that offense against infinite love. He was able to reconcile us to God. Jesus offers us forgiveness of our sins. And so Jesus alone can save us from the consequences of our sins, which are eternal death and damnation in hell. So Jesus saves us from these. But the message of salvation goes beyond. The good news ramps up even more, that Jesus saves us for eternal glory in heaven. Jesus saves us for a loving relationship with God, intimacy with God, being children of God here and now in this life. Jesus saves us for abundant life, a new life in the Spirit in this life. That is amazing. That's incredible good news. And the more we understand this message of salvation, the more we're going to want to learn about it. Our Lenten journey with the Discovery Studies is exactly about going deeper, a little more in depth into this message of salvation. So again, we're going to hand out the cards Tuesdays and Thursday nights during Lent. We're going to have a large group gathering in the hall, large group presentation, small group breakouts. If you're not able to commit to one of those nights, like even if you're not sure, just come to the first night. Right? That's the only commitment I'm asking. Come to the first night. Check it out. Experience it for yourself. Now, if you're not able to make those evenings, please sign up for a morning or afternoon session, because we want everyone to have the opportunity to go more in depth into the message of salvation this Lent. So again, the more we understand the gospel, the message of salvation, the more we want to learn about it. The more we learn about it, the more we will love Jesus. The more we love Jesus, the more we'll want to tell others about him. St. Paul really understood the message of salvation, and it led him to say, "Woe to me if I do not proclaim the gospel." Now, you and I aren't on the same level as St. Paul in authority as an apostle, but we can apply it to ourselves. So I would say, woe to me if I do not preach the gospel to you. And you would have to say something like, woe to me if I do not proclaim the gospel to my children or to my family. All right? So next time you have somebody in your life who's saying, gee, just quit harping on me about all that religious stuff, just shout out, woe to me if I do not proclaim the gospel. Let me know what happens. I'd be really, right? I'd like to tell everybody here about it, what happens. But so Pope Francis puts it in a different way, but it's a wonderful way. In his apostolic exhortation, he writes, "All of us are called to offer others an explicit witness to the saving love of the Lord." To offer an explicit witness. 2 weeks ago, we had someone give a witness at the end of Mass. We're going to have someone again this week give an explicit witness in their life to the saving love of the Lord. That's that message of salvation I'm talking about. He goes on, "Who despite our imperfection offers us his closeness, his word, his strength, and gives meaning to our lives. In your heart you know that it is not the same to live without him. What you have come to realize, what has helped you to live and given you hope, is what you also need to communicate to others." So just to summarize the message today, Jesus still speaks to us with authority through the scriptures and his church. His life continues to proclaim the message of salvation. In his very person, Jesus Christ embodies the gospel. And as we seek to understand his gospel, to live his gospel, the more deeply we will fall in love with him.